Yeah, that's the one I want. Sure.
This one?
Just the first one, yeah.
So just FYI, we are live streaming now, so you start.
Live stream, so I can't swear anymore.
I've got this one. This one's on now.
Okay. Can you turn on or your?
I'm not turned on yet.
Okay.
Okay, that good to go?
Yeah, it's fine. Everything, that's it.
Excellent. And this is the, once you take this now, you're the first one to use it, and then when you're done with it, just hand it off to Wilson. Yeah.
So where are you going to be, where are you focused?
I'm going to be here because I got to switch between slide decks
Yeah,
to start.
I'm going to sit over here, or maybe over here.
Oh, I can move slide this way.
Okay, so I've got, let me show you what we got going on. We got a minute.
Well, actually, you know what, it probably makes more sense with this camera. It probably makes more sense with me.
Because you need to move the camera around.
Well, and also because, yeah, getting out of here is not.
Not bad. So, we're going to trade around on some of those folks up there. So. There's 3 of them up there. And we're going to, so you get one of those, and Wilson's going to take that one down, so that you can see the slide. I'm going to start out up there because I've got to move for the introductions, and I'm going to move through some slide decks, and then once I'm done with the slide decks, we're done with the introductions, I'm just going to move back over here and sit with you guys. Okay, welcome back, everybody. My name is Richard Jimerson with the Internet Society, and I'm going to get us started with the next panel. Our final panel of the day is Industry Collaboration, Working Together to Deploy IPv6. We have an excellent panel prepared for you here today. We're going to get down and dirty with the IPv6 topic. I encourage you guys to ask questions from the audience as we get started with the panel. The way that we're structuring the last hour for panel is I'm going to give some introductions. We're going to have some opening remarks from each of the panelists, and then we're going to start a Q&A. I have a few questions prepared that I actually heard this morning at the booth that we were standing at, but I would love to get more questions from the audience if you have them. So start thinking of those as we're starting the event, and we'll definitely come to the audience for some questions. So I'd like to go ahead and get started and start introducing our great panel here today. We have with us Wilson Ang, the Deputy Director of Technology and Planning Group at IDA Singapore. Mr. Wilson Ang is responsible for providing technology stewardship and strategic planning at IDA Singapore. This includes assessing emerging technology trends and recommending technology adoption to stimulate economic growth and eventual widespread industry adoption. Mr. Ang has held several senior positions at Avaya and Hewlett-Packard, including Vice President of HP Enterprise Sales Operations for the Asia-Pacific region. So let's please invite Wilson to the panel. Also, we have Rajiv Asati, a distinguished engineer at Cisco. Rajiv Asati, a distinguished engineer with about 13 years of Cisco life, is responsible for IP/NGN architecture and strategies with special focus on IPv6 enablement and IPv4 address exhaustion. During his career with Cisco, he has worked with hundreds of large service providers, Fortune 500 company enterprises, governments, universities, and other types of organizations around the world. Rajiv also holds 40+ patents and is an active contributor at Cable Labs and at the IETF. Also with us today, we have John Brzezowski. John is Fellow and Chief IPv6 Architect at Comcast Cable Communications. John provides technical leadership and guidance for Comcast's deployment of IPv6 across all of its services. John has contributed significantly to many standards and technologies critical to the adoption of IPv6 globally, across voice, video, and internet networks and services. John also serves as the co-chair of the IPv6 working group at the IETF. And our final panelist today is Dick Bussiere, Solutions Architect at Arbor Networks. Mr. Bussiere is a seasoned technical architect with over 20 years of experience in engineering, business development, sales, and marketing. Mr. Bussiere has a strong background in research and development, including both software and hardware engineering, and he holds several patents in the area of computer networking and technology. Dick has been very active in the IEEE and IETF over the years. So with that, those are my introduction to the panelists. Each panelist is going to give 5 minutes of opening remarks, and 2 of those are supported by slides, so I am going to switch up with the slides, and I'm going to invite Dick to go ahead and get us started.
Thank you very much. So very briefly, I'm with Arbor Networks, and Arbor Networks is a company that makes technologies that provide information about how the internet works and also helps to mitigate denial of service attacks actively. If you're a service provider, you're probably one of our customers. In fact, at this point in time, we have approximately 9% of the Tier 1 service providers are our customers, and we see approximately 30% of the world's internet traffic at any given moment in time. That gives us an awful lot of visibility, and one of the things that gives us visibility into is how much IPv6 traffic is really on the internet at any given point in time. So we've got some fairly accurate statistics from that based on approximately 250 sensors positioned globally through most of the Tier 1 internet service providers. A couple things. First, we send a survey every year to most of our customers. And most of our customers at this point obviously are implementing V6 already. 80% of respondents have either V6 implemented already or plan on doing so within the next 12 months. Of course, in 12 months' time, we'll have another look and see if they've actually followed through with their plans. My guess is they're usually slower than what they say. Interestingly and surprising to me, since I actually live in Asia, is the exhaustion of IPv4 address space is not necessarily seen as a concern by the majority of respondents. So that kind of supports the assertion that perhaps business risk is one of the primary reasons why people are starting to deploy V6, because it does make sense. What happens if you don't? What's the risk if you don't do something, right? And then the final thing is most will see dual stacks as the strategy. Globally, this chart here gives you an assessment of how much IPv6 traffic is transmitted over the past. I think it starts in June or May of 2012 and goes on until the 9th of March 2013. It looks like it's growing fairly flatly. The only reason you see a spike here is because we added another large provider that provided an additional amount, a lot more traffic, but the amount that in proportion to the IPv4 traffic, it ends up being a wash. So as you can see, it's relatively flat globally, worldwide. It looks like it's about, in terms of percentage, I think I'd rather express it in percentage, it's about 0.2% on the peaks, and generally 0.1% of the internet traffic all the time. If you look at the percentage for Asia Pacific, it's slightly higher. It looks like it's 0.2%, or actually I can't even make up the number here. About 0.1% across the board. Again, the time begins in about a year ago and follows through to here. So the volume of traffic overall for IPv6 is still extremely small. Unfortunately, I'm actually quite surprised it's this small, but it is what it is based on what we see, unless, of course, you're Comcast. So that's my opening remarks. I think it'll be an interesting discussion moving forward.
All right, wonderful. So you said unless you're Comcast, and next up we have John Brzezowski from Comcast.
Good afternoon. Can you guys hear me? Good afternoon, folks. So thank you very much for for having us. We've been deploying V6 for the past 8 years. When we first started out, I admit everybody thought we were crazy. But the fact of the matter is our deployment in use of V6 is very purposeful. We recognized early on, and I mentioned this earlier when I made some comments to Dan when Dan York was on the stage here. For us, IP6 has been all about business continuity. We've spent the past 8 years incrementally readying our infrastructure, incrementally deploying IP6, largely because my executives have made it very clear to me that the deployment of V6 must not impact the customer experience. So for us, it's really been a must-have, and really the driving force behind it has largely been the fact that V4 is, it's going away. So in order to ensure that we could protect the business and our customer experience, we really felt that it was important to stay strong as far as our deployment of V6 is concerned. Over the past several years, what we've found with our deployment of V6 is not only has it really helped us and shielded us from some potentially negative matters related to business business continuity, but it's also provided us an extraordinary platform for innovation. There are many things that we're doing beyond managing our infrastructure, offering data services that are dual stack. We're also looking and very aggressively looking to move our voice and video services to support IP6 as well. And hopefully this clearly illustrates what we view as one of the greatest values in this protocol. And really that's all I have, Richard. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, John. And next up we have Rajiv from Cisco.
Good afternoon, everybody. So at Cisco, as an IPv6 evangelist, I got sort of two folds in my responsibilities. One, to work internally, and the other, to work externally. So internally, I work with our business units, our service organization to really help and guide, develop many of the V6 features that we need to help our customers, the network operators, actually deploy V6 to satisfy their business needs. And now we're getting into the points where, well, geez, WebEx, one of the Cisco services being offered to the customers, well, does that work over V6? Besides routers and switches that we've always been making and ensuring the V6 always work to the point it should. And, oh, geez, oh no, what about these big data analytics that we offer, data crunching? Does that work with V6 in the context of, hey, how much of traffic running in any SP or any enterprise network is going over V6 versus V4? To what websites, to what applications? So a lot of that is being driven as one of the responsibilities internally. Now externally, I work with the large network operators, both service providers and enterprises, to help them guide and develop the V6 strategy. And our experience in doing so, my experience in doing so has been very interesting. There are operators I find that are really big on V6, Comcast being one of them, where there are operators who don't necessarily see V6 being the utmost important thing for their business models. Now, what is really interesting that this mentality has changed over the last few years, especially in the last 3 years since we had the V6 World Day and V6 World launch, and the awareness that went on helped, I think, all of us tremendously to get these, many of the network operators actually embrace V6. Now, the third aspect, of course, is Cisco as an enterprise. We have nearly 70,000 employees around the world, and internally, we didn't do any IPv6. As an enterprise, Cisco IT had the same set of questions that many of you would have been asking inside your organization. Why should we do V6? What's the driver for IPv6? And a few years ago, we realized that the IPv4 addresses that we have been using, the public block, we would be running out sooner than later. So guess what? Since last year, we started enabling V6 so aggressively, you know, and taking outside-in approach, meaning you start from the internet edge, your peering routers to the back to the core and to the campus, and now building by building, in campus by campus, city by city, we are rolling out V6 so that more and more traffic is over IPv6, and now we have started moving users, employees, to use private IPv4 because we are running out. We want to conserve those public IP addresses for data centers, for virtual machines, and that they're exploding. And now what we are finding, many enterprises are in the same boat that offer services to their customers. So IPv6, as we are finding, whether we are looking from the enterprise viewpoint or the ISPs or SPs viewpoint, is becoming extremely fundamental. Now, some are really fast and ahead, some are somewhat slow, but this is happening at much faster rate than we thought, well, geez, 8 years ago.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Rajiv. And next up, we have Wilson.
Hello. Good afternoon. For IDA, we recognize that IPv6 is going to be a long journey. So we launched the IPv6 program about 2 years ago. And the first thing we look at is at the entire ecosystem to make sure that we at least have a plan in place to create awareness for the industry. So I think the first thing we did was, as a government, we need to set examples, right? So right now, most of our government agencies, for their e-services, you can access it through IPv6, right? Another one is our top ranking website in Singapore. We supported them in migrating to IPv6. And even our top local bank is now in the process of migrating to IPv6. So we try to stimulate sort of a demand, right, in that aspect. On the supply side, in fact, many of our ISPs are in various stages of their planning to support IPv6. From a regulatory point of view, we have made an announcement that in June this year, there will be this no island policy whereby all our residential user is able to access IPv4 or IPv6 over the next 3 years. And if you go to the IDA portal, the marketplace, you can find over 20 IPv6 vendors offerings. Oh, I think I pressed the wrong key.
That's right.
Okay.
There you go.
Now, on the awareness side, in the past 2 years, we had 2 conferences and 1 forum, as well as broadcasting our quarterly e-newsletter to about 1,500 professionals, sharing success stories of our implementation in the local landscape. And on the competency side, we support multiple IPv6 certified courses to both the professionals as well as the institutes of higher learning. So I just want to illustrate in terms of awareness, and the last conference that we had, our theme is around innovations and what are the opportunities and the big subject of security. Dick was one of the panelists inside there. So it was a good turnout, right? We got a lot of positive feedback from that conference, and there will be one more that we're going to schedule sometime in the later part of this year. And in terms of competency, as a result of the trainings that we have offered to the institutes of higher learning, about 2 weeks ago, we had a sort of a competition. We call it the Innovation Challenge. And we had about 20 plus submission, of which we shortlisted 11. And The winner, in fact, was nominated to present and demo their showcase in the coming China IPv6 Summit. So you see there's a lot of creativity and bright ideas coming from our institutes of higher learnings. And a couple of the projects that came out from the Institute of Higher Learnings was also being considered by the industry. And lastly here, just stories. You can go to the IDA websites, some of the stories from the popular websites such as the Property Guru or the Job Street. I think you can find testimonies of the benefits that they've gained in moving to IPv6.
Excellent. Thank you very
Richard.
much, Wilson. So I'm going to work my way back over to the panel. Let me get another slide up here. So I'm going to start off with a question. I'm going to ask an obvious question. And any of you can jump in and you can let me know what you think about this. But IPv6 has been with us since 1999 in the production space. So we're well past 10 years. And I've heard a lot of people say a lot of things about IPv6 over the years. But to you, what's the biggest misconception about IPv6 that you can think of that you would love to set straight to anyone that might be listening?
Okay, I have something which I think is important to share. This is part of the discovery that we have made. From what we know, even myself at one point in time, we thought that, hey, if I'm on IPv4, I'm safe. I don't have to worry, right? But whole and behold, that's not true, right? So even though you are on an IPv4 network today, with all those kind of smart devices today that are supporting IPv6, you got to watch out for that, right? So the IPv6 is in the network even though you're on IPv4. And I think that's something that you got to really look at, right?
All right, excellent, thank you.
I think it depends on which industry you're in and what time frame you're in, and the misconception would certainly vary. The one I would point out certainly is the perception, misconception many had about IPv6, that IPv6 was inherently secure. Of course, that sort of finally been going away as more and more awareness is coming along. The other misconception at a given point of time many of us had, geez, IPv6 is not needed. We got plenty of addresses. I got no business problems with having to depend on IPv6. Of course, that misconception is going away as we are seeing operators, businesses actually having to see the business continuity problem by not having to move IPv6. So the answer sort of varies.
Excellent.
So Richard, I was going to offer a variation of that. I'm probably not going to go down that path, but I mean, there was a point in time where folks would say, we do not, we're not going to deploy v6 as if, that was okay, right? Not being fully aware of the v4 side of things. But really the point that I'll zero in on here is a lot of people that I've spoken to over the years, v6 is hard. It's impossible, right? It's actually not. Is it a lot of work? Yes. Of course it is. Just like anything that we do is a lot of work, but it is possible. You really just have to assess your situation and put a plan in place. It is very much a possible thing to do, right? It's, for some networks it takes longer than others, but with the right view on the problem and insight, it can be done, right? So really one of the things that I try to dispel for people is it is absolutely possible. It's a lot of the work is really not that complicated. It's just work.
Interesting, thank you.
I'm just going to comment on the security dimension of it. Some people might think it's more secure. Some people might think it's less secure. Overall, it's neutral, because most of the vulnerabilities and most of the security problems exist in the application layer, not in the protocol layer. So it ends up, as far as from a security perspective, not making much of a difference one way or the other. So you can erase the security concerns, I think, off of your head. The big risk is if you have it turned on and your downstream equipment doesn't support it. That's where you have to be a little more careful. And that's a matter for you as an operator or owner of equipment to have to upgrade your equipment to be IPv6 compliant.
But Dick, one thing I'll say about that is with v6, it is less likely network scans are a lot less
Yeah, that's very
successful.
true. They don't work anymore, frankly.
Well,
Yeah.
there are other things that one could do, but frankly speaking, that is actually one of the things that we've seen, I guess, from a pseudo security point of view, that is actually a benefit for V6, right? Because V4 is actually quite easy to scan.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's just the fact that V6 has such a larger address span, having to be able to span all of the addresses in that span, it's going to take a lot longer than that of IPv4. So in that sense, it's somewhat better. But I do agree with Dick that most of the vulnerabilities really existing in the application stack that have been hurting us more than anything else. So the IP layer is somewhat neutral in that respect.
All right, excellent. Thanks for that. I think those are some really good perspectives. Now, John, I got a question for you. You had touched on this a little bit, and it came up earlier during the business case presentation where we talked about Comcast. But could you talk a little bit more about why the deployment of IPv6 is important to your company?
Absolutely, Richard. To put it plainly, V4 is a finite resource. We have a very large network. We have a lot of subscribers, and the fact of the matter is we need every single one of them to really start using V6 and start the process of stopping the use of V4. Right? Every customer that uses V4 is a customer that at some point in the future, if they don't move to V6, we're going to have to come up with creative ways to support them. Many of the ones that we've seen, that we've kind of talked peripherally here about, category nets. Category nets in particular comes with great expense and complexity. And I purposely don't call it an investment because it's really not, right? It's kind of a cost of doing business at that point, because you have to support what I'll call a legacy protocol.
Mm-hmm. So you brought up carrier-grade NAT. Some people call it large-scale NAT. I would really love to hear what the rest of you think about NAT. If anyone would you like to comment on that, because I cannot tell you how much I hear about large-scale carrier-grade NAT from people out in the industry, and different people have different thoughts on it. And some people say, yeah, the whole internet's going to move that way, and everyone will do large-scale NAT. Other people say, I'll never touch it. What do you guys think? I mean, is that something that we all need to be thinking about right now?
Oh, absolutely. I'll put it as bluntly as I can. CGN is more like a disease that we should try to stay away from. Now, there are scenarios where we can't stay away from it. We gotta have the disease, but that should be the last resort. And look, vendors, Cisco's a big vendor of these CGN devices and appliances and router blades, but those are meant to provide, stopgap solution. Okay, well, Mr. Operator, you have certain constraints that you can move into enabling V6, and you have to support your business. Here's like a temporary solution. And it cannot be a permanent, or rather, longer-term temporary solution, as many of the folks might be thinking about. Hey, we're going to go with CGN. We'll continue to using that. As John rightly said, it comes with a lot of complexity. And I've been personally involved in some of the network designs and architectures where I had to use CGN, and it became really complex. I mean, I can run down the list from having to maintain the net traffic symmetry and having to then maintain the logging infrastructure, having to maintain the infrastructure to comply with regulatory requirements, and having to maintain a protocol to do the NAT mappings and port controls. The list goes on. It's a sheer CapEx and OpEx impact by having to do CGN. So the wishful thinking is that one should not take CGN as the panacea. CGN can be a very short-term stopgap if you can't afford to push along V6 while supporting your business, but cannot be the permanent, cannot be a long-term solution.
All right, excellent.
I violently agree with you. And the other dimension, again, from an availability perspective, is I think such a gateway is subject to state exhaustion attacks in the internet. Again, putting on my DDoS hat as an Arbor guy, and that's something that can be avoided altogether if that device just doesn't exist in your network. I think it's a temporary solution. I think hopefully as V6 picks up, these things will die a death slowly, but I also am of the opinion they're never going to go away completely. I think V6 and V4 are going to coexist long after I'm retired or dead. So I really think so.
I do agree with you, and that's one of the common questions I get asked. Will V4 go away, sooner than later? And the answer is, at least my opinion, is no. I'm thinking at least a decade or two, where some of the long tail content will stay on V4, since the owners of the content might not see any reasons to move to V6. So that might be a small percentage long tail, but I think we're going to have V4 for a long time to come.
Okay.
Yeah. From what I've seen, certainly those companies who have taken that approach, right, is looking at it from a short-term perspective. So that's true, and also probably it's also easier to justify, right, because it's less costly. But I think they're fully aware that in the long term, right, they got to go to the proper full stack solution. So this, I see, is a bit short term. Right?
So once one of the things that I said earlier is there are some people who've consciously chose not to deploy IPv6, believing that NAT was not in their future. Oddly enough, one of the things that we've done years ago as part of our program is we really went and did a very comprehensive analysis of what it would take to do NAT at various levels. Hypothetically speaking, within the Comcast network. The cost alone, and this is truly from an operator's perspective. So, this was really our situation that we assessed. The cost of disk, this cost of systems to develop to be able to search all of this log information. That's just the tip of the iceberg. We've actually had worked with some specific cable organizations to run some real live tests. The even greater cost comes in the form of what happens to the customer experience. You now have port contention, bandwidth contention. You have things that originally would break because IP flows. You couldn't get the return port back, like certain types of media devices. But now we're finding that there are even more rudimentary impacts to the experience in the form of video tiling, things just not working at the performance or the quality that one expects them to. They're pervasive and they're impactful.
All right, excellent, thank you. Wilson, I've got a question for you. So we've been talking a little bit about how far out we're using carrier-grade NAT, and we're talking about decades. And we all know that IPv6 in the long run is the future of the internet. There's absolutely no question about that, because IPv4 cannot scale to our needs as a community going forward. But if you went 5 years out, just 5 years out, in your opinion, what will the IPv6 landscape look like in the next 5 years?
So this is a tough question, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. I think what is important is to be ready for it, right? Whatever the outcome will be, whether there is a very high adoption or a slow take-up, the important thing is to be ready and really be ready in many fronts, right? Number one is from a Singapore landscape, do we have people who are knowledgeable about IPv6, right? Who is able to know what to do, right, when the time comes. So that's why there's a lot of emphasis in developing the kind of a competency to train our workforce so that in a couple of years we have people who are ready for it, right? The other one is to create examples to show that it's really not that bad to move to IPv6, right? That's why we supported several of the top websites, right? To show that, hey, it can be done, right? It's not something that is a mystery, right? I've seen different approaches, and I think these are good learning. And in fact, when they have gone through the exercise of migrating to IPv6, there's lots of learning, right? So that is something that you sort of build your experience, right? And so it is all this process of building the knowledge and going through the experience, right, will help you to be sort of ready. And I want to add one other thing is we're telling the enterprises here, take advantage of your refresh cycle. That's the best time for you to really, consider, right, whether you should refresh some of your newer equipments to IPv6. Right.
That's interesting. Thank you very much. And that brings me to another question. And Dick, I'd like to ask you this question, and it's related to this. So there are probably a lot of people in the audience that will be deploying IPv6 in the near future that have not done it yet. What are some of the things that they should be thinking about right now as they prepare themselves to move to the IPv6 world?
That's easy, okay? The thing that I think, again, a lot of the, first of all, every client machine has supported IPv6 and IPv4 since I think 2003, correct me if I'm wrong. Pretty much Windows XP brought it to life, right? And ever since then, it's been there. The client side is not really the issue. I think the issue is the legacy infrastructure you've got within your local area network and the security infrastructure you have to protect that local area, to protect the intersection between your local area network and the internet itself. I think the most recent statistics I've seen indicate that about 50 to 60% of that, a lot of that security equipment is probably not IPv6 compatible yet. It'll just pass IPv6 clean on through, which means you lose your security for V6, and it makes V6 a nice vehicle for bad things, okay? I think that you need to really take a careful look at, do an inventory of the equipment you've got in your network and make sure that's V6 compatible before you even allow V6 into your network, okay? I think the second thing, at least from a consumer perspective, is the edge equipment. Okay, I'm a geek. If I could use V6 today, I would, but I can't because the modem I have doesn't support it. So, I mean, going to a Singapore example, I think that, and I'm pretty sure you guys are trying to push it, when the next refresh cycle comes, when you go and resubscribe for your DSL service or fiber service, at that point, hopefully the providers are providing an access device that supports V6 very nicely and very cleanly. Singapore is not very big. Singapore has a great opportunity to be one of the leading countries in terms of V6 deployment if we can just get over the hurdle of the access equipment on the edge of fabric.
All right, thank you. John, do you have anything that you'd like to add to that? What should people be thinking of right now?
I think different strokes for different folks,
Yeah.
right? So couldn't agree more with many of the points that Dick made. The access network for us, honestly, it was next to some of the back office and systems level work. It was probably, bar none, the most significant area of focus that we had to really pay attention to make sure that we got V6 there. We have been putting, just to give you an example, a page at a Comcast, for the past 4 years, we have been upgrading our, even DOCSIS 2.0 cable modems support V6. So once we got all the stars lined up, we had quite a large population of modems waiting for us to enable V6 on. The other thing, Richard, like I said, some of the different areas are, as Dan cited earlier, we have a pretty good, well, we have some sampling of data that tells us how much traffic is coming out of a house once it goes V6. So we would say anywhere from say 20 to 40% as an upper limit. So you guys would say, wow, that's pretty good. Well, I would say my glass is half empty, right? I see it as I have another 60% to go, 60% to go. So what is holding me back? So one of the things that we've spent a lot of time on as we've gotten our access network ready has been consumer electronics.
Yeah.
Right. So I've got this brand new TV in my house. My kids love to watch, video over the top. Unfortunately, they're condemned to a life of video over the top over IP4 at the moment. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to something we talked about earlier, depending on your context, consumer electronics is a key area.
Rajiv, I've got a question for you. Please feel free to respond to this, but as you're doing that, start thinking about what does consumer electronics performance, what does service performance look like inside the user's home, inside the small business's network, behind large-scale IPv4 NATs? Is the performance about the same as it is right now over non-NATed v4, or is it something completely different?
Sure. Let me answer a couple of questions that have been passed around. So what should one really be doing to enable IPv6, or what are the several steps one could take? Well, as Dick rightly pointed out, audit your network. And when I say network, it's not the network that we think from the routers and switches standpoint. It's the end-to-end to make V6 really work. I'll tell you, based on our experience working with enterprises and service providers, network part is easy. It's real easy. The difficult part is the back end, as John rightly pointed out. We have been seeing amazing set of surprises to figure out, oh boy, oh, this machine, this server that's been running my most critical application, it doesn't support v6. And you go through this laundry list, you'll find hundreds, 200s of these things that you have to really bang your head against to figure out what vendor, who's a support system, and this and that. That is where most of the time gets consumed from our experience. Now, so one is the back end, the data center side, the other is the network in the middle, then you have, of course, the customers, whether that's the business customers or the residential customers. And that last mile access in many cases become another bottleneck that's somewhat difficult to get by. Now, the router that I got in my home, it didn't support IPv6. Well, of course, me being somewhat of a geek, I could replace it. And there's always an argument, well, general population doesn't care about IPv6, nor should they. And what I've begun to assert is there are two sets of users in our world now. One, they really don't care. The other, they do. Now, of course, the majority is still in the former category, but the latter is no more negligible. I mean, there are gamers who now actually care about the IP transport being used because they got to set up the NAT to make sure the game works fine, and there are users who care about their experience. So given that we have the mix of these two users, it becomes important to acknowledge and recognize their needs and to serve them appropriately. Like when I call this support, I'm expecting someone on the other side of the phone to know what I'm saying and not treat me like I know nothing. Oh, of course, that doesn't always go that well. But auditing the network.
I'll be nicer next time, Rajiv.
Well, auditing the network is certainly the first step. And when I say network, again, not just the one in the middle, but one in the data center, one going to the last mile into the home. Then certainly figure out your business needs. What applications being used? Audit them. Can they support IPv6? We've been working with this network operator the last year or so, and network is all good, hunky, but it's all enabled for v6. Well, turns out the video they're using, the video application, doesn't support, the streamer doesn't support IPv6. So guess what? 60% of the traffic that they're planning to carry over this network, we enabled v6, and few of them kept saying v6 only. Well, turn out it would be v4 only because the applications that are being carried over this network don't support IPv6. So that auditing is extremely important. The sooner you catch them, the better you would be off to get them to add IPv6 enabled and supported and being used.
Right.
And so now coming to the last question you asked, I'll be quick.
Well, I need to be fair to the audience here. I know I asked you another question, but I do want to go to the audience and see if there are any questions, but we are going to cover that one because I think that one's important. Before we move forward with additional questioning here, I'd love to get some questions from the audience if there are any. Please put up your hand if you'd like to ask a question to the IPv6 panel.
Also, this would be a good time for people to fill out their forms, right?
Yeah, and please start doing that. And I think we've got a question in the back of the room.
Oh, we do? Okay, let me go
Yes.
back there.
And as Dan's going back there with the microphone, please start filling out your forms because in about 20 minutes we'll be doing a drawing.
My name is Samuel. I'm from XSD and Forensics. And we deal with a variety of clients, and some of them are very much legacy users. And from their standpoint, they have very heavy critical machines that are very much based on Windows NT. So you can understand where I'm coming from. So they have crossover networks that all work on IP4. So if you want to translate them back, do you have 4 to 6 translators?
Guys, what do you think?
If an operating system upgrade is out of the question, then that's probably what I would look to do. Yeah.
Yeah, and in fact, there are operators who have been doing this. In fact, there are certain proposals that very much provoke the usage of 6.4 NAT 6.4. Well, one way to solve it, web balancers. load balancers as another way to solve it, and some of them are being used in production today that do not require changing a whole stack at all, especially in the data center. So you front end these devices with dual stack load balancers or NAT64. Of course, both of them have interesting properties. And you completely mask the lack of V6 on these end host or end servers from rest of the world and still provide the seamless experience to the users, whether they come over V4 or V6.
What we've seen in many cases like that is, while it's a good place to start, many large adopters of IPv6 have really used that as a point to get started, but ultimately find their way eventually to implementing native. We've never, except in the very early days of our trial, we used a technique like that. We didn't actually use hardware. We used open source software to do that. We enabled our own content over V6 using, basically open source proxy technology. But ultimately, our goal was to retire that and go native as soon as we could. So it's a great way to get started. I would encourage you to follow that path, but always in the back of your mind, have a plan to go native end to end.
Absolutely.
I think that we have another question from the audience.
Hi. This is a question to Mr. John from Comcast. Understand from your earlier introduction that Comcast is going to soon launch voice and video services over IPv6. So my question is basically, does Comcast believe that there are features in IPv6 that can enhance the quality of voice and video?
As a matter of fact, yes. There are some properties of V6 that we are currently researching outside of the obvious one, where it'll relieve us from our dependency on IPv4, right? I mean, that's a common theme. It's not sexy, but frankly, it is a real benefit to IPv6. But there are other properties that we're investigating right now, we're researching right now, that we believe V6 will offer an advantage compared to doing it in V4. So if you wish, we could talk about that offline, or even after the panel. But yes, that is a good observation.
Do we have any other questions from the audience? All right, excellent. I would love to pick back up on. We've got about another 5 minutes, and if we could go around and talk a little bit about what that coexistence of IPv4 on the network and IPv6 on the network is like going forward, and a little bit about the carrier grade NAT experience. If we can each just talk a minute about that and give your thoughts on that, or any experiences that you might have with it, I think that would be excellent, because I think we get a lot of questions about that from the community.
Yeah, I want to share, this is still early days. We are conducting an experiment to see what's the performance like between V6 and V4. So I won't say it's conclusive, but from the preliminary data that we've gathered, what we did was, because we tried to search for overseas content over V4 and V6, and surprisingly, the V6 performance is better, right? So we suspect that, because probably you have lesser hops, right? And no nets over, right? Probably it's end-to-end, right? So this is one of the characteristics of V6, right? With end-to-end, right? So let's see how the data goes, but I thought I should want to share this preliminary finding.
Interesting.
V6, yeah.
Thank you very much, Wilson.
We've seen similar data, Richard. So
Okay.
that's an interesting observation, and we conduct a significant number of measurements on a daily basis to many popular websites to really kind of keep an eye on performance of popular websites, because after the day is done, it's really about our customers' experience. So it behooves us to keep tabs on that.
All right, excellent. Dick, did you have some comments on that?
Just one thing. It's nice to hear the performance is better. I suspect it's because the routing plane is a lot simpler with V6 than with V4. You can correct me if I'm wrong, especially you. But the other thing is, I think in the short term, it might end up complicating matters a little bit, only for security policies and things like that, because you've got two sets, or maybe two sets of policies to maintain for two different sets of addresses. You got to take care of your IPv4 addresses and your V6 addresses. Other than that, it should be, I think, fairly smooth.
Okay.
So I think I may have a sort of a different opinion. The performance might vary based on where you are, which part of the world you are, and which server you're trying to access. And what we are finding that the transit makes the biggest difference. So and the fact of the matter today is the V6 transit is not as dense as that of V4 transit. Having said that, if the destination, the server, the website you're trying to get to from the location you're in happens to have your ISP getting direct peering with that provider, content provider, well, then there is really no transit. But if you're trying to get to a website that's really out in the boonies and you have to go through the transit, your performance over V4 might be slightly better than that of V6. So there are different angles to analyzing the performance. So at Cisco, we enabled V6, right? And we've been enabling V6, and we've been monitoring some of these analysis as well. Interesting enough, we are finding actually V6 being slightly better than V4 to certain websites that we have been monitoring. Okay? And the latency is somewhat better. Now, of course, that's not true for all the websites. That's not true for all the users within Cisco located in different parts of the world. But certainly in North America, that's what our experience has been. Now coming to the question, large-scale NAT, it doesn't necessarily introduce any latency by itself. As far as the packet forwarding is concerned, we're talking about, what, 3-4 microseconds per NAT lookup. That's peanuts. When you're talking about 120 milliseconds to go from, from here in Singapore, I was trying to do some tests, to Hong Kong, it was around 120 milliseconds. So 3-4 microseconds makes no difference whatsoever. But the challenges that CGN brings into the table are along the line of having to deal with number of ports you have been allocated, and the fact that you are sharing that port range with a large set of users. That's where the port exhaustion makes the biggest difference. And this is what many of our network operators tell us. Hey, help us sort of come up with techniques that don't result in someone DDoSing that very port range.
All right, interesting. John, I think that you guys have done some testing with that. Can you talk a bit about the user experience with a large-scale NAT driven far past where we are today, and versus a V6 experience, what it's going to look like in many years here to come?
What we've done, Richard, is we've done some collaborative work with Cable Labs, which is a partner, kind of a partner organization with Comcast from a specifications point of view. We've done some testing there, and while the latency, I was raising an eyebrow at the beginning of Rajiv's comment, but he recovered nicely. But the latency, I would agree. But after the day is done, it's really the port, and more important, and coupled with bandwidth. And originally, many of the tests that were done early on by would-be adopters of carrier-grade NATs really did not test CGNs in the way they're going to be deployed. You can have a vendor build the greatest carrier-grade NAT box in the universe, but after the day is done, it is completely up to the conditions that the operator has to deploy that NAT under that's going to determine how it performs. If you oversubscribe ports, if you don't have enough ports to satisfy all of the connections coming out of Rajiv's house, or if you don't have enough ports to satisfy all the bandwidth, it is plain and simple, Richard. The device will not, the performance for that particular household or set of devices will not be there for a proper experience. So you're talking about things like over-the-top video, no longer working. Things like popular communications programs that you use to call home when you're traveling abroad, not working. On the flip side, we know that when you enable native V6 alongside of it, which is what we've chosen to do, it really bypasses all of that spaghetti, for lack of a better term, all that mess, ensuring a proper experience. But it does require from end to end V6 connectivity.
Very interesting. Thank you very much for that, because I think it paints a picture of where we're going to be a few years down the road, because large-scale NAT is going to happen in many networks. People are going to have to go through that experience, and they're going to have to see what it's like. And it'll be interesting when we get 5 years down the road, what exactly that looks like. So we're nearing the end of the time that we have today, so what I would like to do is I would like to go around the panel, and I would like each of you to spend a minute. If the audience here had one thing, if you had one thing that you wanted the audience to take away about IPv6, when they went back to their businesses and they talked to their colleagues and talked to their friends, what's that one thing that you want them to go away with? Starting with you, Wilson.
Okay. Well, in fact, many things comes to my mind. I think the important thing is to be prepared, right? Get your IT staff trained. Rajiv, you talk about audit. I think that's important as well, right? Understand the state of your network and just be prepared. And as I mentioned before, take advantage of your refresh cycle, right?
Excellent, thank you. Dick?
You stole my thought.
Uh-oh.
But basically, I would say get busy now. It's the same thing I said when I did the conference a few months ago. Get busy now. Don't be afraid of it. It'll probably take you 2 years of planning and refresh to get to a point where you can support it securely. But if you don't start now, you're never going to get it done. So if there's one takeaway I'd like you to go back with, start. Don't wait anymore. It's time. It's over.
Thanks, Dick. Rajiv?
Yeah, I mean, IPv6 is no longer the future, as many of us would be saying, geez, 8 years, 6 years ago. It's now. It's happening, and do it now, else the risk of having to keep up with the business continuity is going to increase. For many network operators, yes, v4 address exhaustion is going to become a big of a problem, and v4 address sharing will continue to happen. So enable v6 sooner, and then you would be able to minimize the impact of the v4 address sharing to a great extent.
Thank you, Rajiv. John?
Turn something on with V6. Go home, pick a day, just commit, promise yourself that you're going to turn something on, because I promise you, as ready as you think you are, you've probably missed something. I can tell you, I admit openly, there's things that we missed, but it is the act of actually believing that you're going to turn it on and go through with it that will it'll open your eyes 100%. So really, promise yourself that you're going to turn something on with V6 and live it.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So everyone, please join me in thanking the panelists. Gentlemen, you did a great job. And the message that I hear, it's time to go start deploying IPv6. So thank you very much, gents. And we have some gifts from SITF for each of you. And as the panelists are starting to make their way off the stage, I'm going to transition over here and do some closing slides for the event today. And if you haven't filled out that form, get the form filled out, because we're going to go through the aisle. We're going to collect it as I'm giving these closing slides. And also, if you don't have the form and you couldn't fill that out, throw a business card or something like that in there. We're going to come through the aisle. We're going to pick that stuff up. And what we're going to do is we're just going to call someone up, and they're going to pick one at random. You have to be in the room to win it for an iPad. But we also have IPv6 Forum of Singapore here with us today, and they're going to be giving away an iPad mini. And they've been collecting some information and some cards from people upstairs on the 4th floor today. We're actually going to draw for their mini. We're going to draw from that. And if you're in the room, that you can actually get that mini. So before I get there, though, just a few closing remarks. Again, as you're going away and you're going home and you're starting to deploy IPv6 or DNSSEC or any new technology that you'd like to talk to us about, please use the Internet Society Deploy 360 program as one of your resources. I know you have many resources, but this is actually a good resource. I do hope that you go there and you do use that. I do want to invite you to become involved in the Internet infrastructure pieces. Get involved with the IETF. Get involved with an operator group. Get involved with the Internet Society. Get involved in the Internet industry. Actually do something, because if you're not out there doing it and you're not taking control of what's going on, someone else is doing it for you. And the open Internet is a true thing. And that goes all the way from being able to create new services and put those online to actually helping out with how the Internet is actually run, what the new standards look like, what the policies look like. Make sure that you're going out there and you're active, because your voice is very important to that. And at the Internet Society, one of the strongest aspects of our global reach here is truly the work of our chapters. The chapters play a very key role in helping us move forward with our programs. If any of you are upstairs on the 4th floor today and you visited with us at the Internet Society booth, you likely spoke to someone from your local Singapore chapter. So please do look at participating with your local chapter here in Singapore, or from wherever you're from. We have chapters all over the globe. And with that, we're going to move on to the drawing for the iPad. So, are we collecting the sheets yet? So let's start collecting the sheets. So, all right, so we're going through and we're collecting those. If anyone has a sheet that hasn't been collected, please hold it up right now. And I'm getting the iPad. I'll be right back. There we go. Okay. All right. So does someone want to bring a box up, and we'll go ahead and pick for the final, or the iPad. And after the iPad, stay here because we're doing a giveaway for an iPad mini from the IPv6 Forum of Singapore. So as soon as that gets up here, we'll go ahead and we'll do the drawing. All right. So anyone in the room is eligible to win, but perhaps Dan, you could help me out because I don't think you're going to win. Maybe you could come pick out of the box for me. I'll hold it, and you can pick one of the names once it gets up here. All right. And it's slowly moving up the room here. And as the thing is coming closer, this is a beautiful 4th generation iPad Retina display, 16 gigabyte. They didn't have it in black, they only had it in white, so it's in white, but it's still a really good iPad.
Supports IPv6 out of the box.
And it supports IPv6 out of the box. I mean, what more can you ask for?
I use it on my home network.
Yeah? Excellent. All right, last chance, last call. Looks like we're all set. Thank you very much. All right, I'm going to mix these up. Okay, Dan, and you can look away. And I just want you to pick one out of random. The person has to be in the room to win. And the winner is, if they're in the room, Eric Wong. Congratulations, Eric. Come on up. Eric, people are going to want to take pictures of you because you won the iPad. Congratulations.
Yep, thank you.
All right. Excellent. Enjoy. We have one more.
We're going to invite Victor, who's the chairman for IPv6 Forum, to take the draw.
Victor, please come on up. Would you like to do the draw? Would you guys like to say anything before we do the drawing? A few words? Come on up, Victor. Would you like to say a few words before you give away the iPad, or you want to go straight to the drawing? Let's go straight to the drawing. We know what people want. They want the iPad mini, right?
They also want to go back.
And they want to go back early. All right, here we go. Picking a random person. This is a big bowl full of names. Does the person have to be here to win it?
Yes, if they don't, they will get a movie ticket.
Okay, if you're not here and this is your name, you get a movie ticket. But if your name is the one I read and you're here, you just won an iPad mini from the IPv6 Forum of Singapore. So the name is Ashish Saw. And I don't know if I said that right. Are you in the room? Ashish Saw.
No, she's not. I think she had gone home. I sent her this morning.
So she gets a movie ticket.
Yes. We will send it to her.
All right. All right, are you in the room? I'm going to need help with the name. Can you help me? All right, please forgive me. You are with 2359 Media, Quaylen, Rebecca Ko. Did I say that correctly? If you're in the room, you'd know it. I think you just won a movie ticket.
Yes.
There you go. And are you in the room? Mark Pickard. Mark, are you in the room? It looks like P-I-C-K-A-R-D. It might be Rickard or Pickard. And I don't think you're in the room because you'd be jumping up right now. I think you just won a movie ticket.
Okay.
How many movie tickets do you have?
We have 5.
All right.
I got 2 more to go.
So we got 2 more movie tickets. This isn't a movie ticket if you're in the room. If your name is Harsha Saxena. Harsha, you just won a movie ticket. We got 1 more movie ticket left. And if this next one's a movie ticket, we're going to start picking them faster and lining them up. Because there's no movie tickets after this.
Yes.
All right. This is either the last movie ticket or the iPad mini if your name is Jonathan who? Jonathan, Managing Director at SES Strategic Executive Search. You just won the last movie ticket. All right, now we're going speed run here.
Yes.
I'm going to read names, and you better jump up quick. Because if I get to the next person, somebody's going to be real disappointed. Is your name Pramod Chetri? Yes. Outstanding, congratulations. That worked out perfectly. We get off the exact number of movie tickets that we needed.
Just waiting for you.
And then the last one won the iPad. Congratulations. Excellent. Outstanding. Thank you very much, IPv6 Forum Singapore. Thank you. And thank you all for coming to the ION portion of the meeting today. We really enjoyed having you. Go home, talk about deploying IPv6, and talk about deploying DNSSEC, and have a wonderful rest of the day. Bye-bye. Would you like to have that back? Thank you.